Hello, and here I am in this strange land called VR, and I'm in TiltBrush. TiltBrush by Google. It's kind of like a video game for artists. So since I've had TiltBrush for about a year now, and I've totally forgotten about this channel, and I've recently came to visit and just check up on all these old videos I've made. I've noticed that I have 71 subscribers. So thank you for subscribing. I had no idea. So I figured I have TiltBrush. Why don't I make some TiltBrush videos? So in this inaugural video, well, my inaugural video about TiltBrush, I figured let's use this video to go over all the tools and see how TiltBrush works. Okay, so the Vive comes with two controllers, and in TiltBrush, one is your brush and one are your tools. The controller has a touchpad here, which is also a button that you can press. There are two buttons on top and on the bottom of the touchpad. On the side, there are these grip buttons, and on the back, there is a trigger button. So in order to paint, you hit the trigger button, and you now can paint in 3D. Of course, to you, it doesn't look like 3D, but I assure you, because you're on a 2D screen, but I assure you, it's completely 3D. Now, let's say I'm right-handed. Let's say you're left-handed. To switch to your brush hand being left-handed, you just tap the bottoms, and now you can draw with your left. So one thing you need is an undo. So to undo this drawing, there are two ways to go about it. On your tool palette, there's an undo and a redo. You could also alternatively hit the trackpad on your tool palette controller and hit the undo button or hit the redo button to bring it back. Mirror mode. So mirror mode will bring up this thing behind me. So mirror mode is pretty much what you'd expect. You draw on this side and it duplicates your drawing on the other side. Pretty useful. So up next is straight edge, which is pretty self-explanatory. Hit the trigger and you could make straight lines. Alternatively, you could also make straight lines by snapping them to 0 or 90 degree or 45 degree angles by, let me just undo these lines, drawing your line and at the same time clicking the trackpad. And what that will do is snap it to either a 45, a 90 degree angle, or a minus 45 or a minus 90 degree angle. All right, so after that we have an eraser, which gives you this sort of sphere on top of your controller. If you hit the trigger, it spins it and turns it red, and you just simply touch the stroke or the brush that you've made, and it will erase it. It's an eraser. Up next is the brush picker tool. And the way that works is it gives you this little brush picker on top of your controller. And the last brush that I used was this green light brush. But let's say I wanted to go back to the blue. Instead of going back to the tools or the brush and selecting all the colors again, I just hit brush picker, select the color or brush that I want to go back to, hit the trigger, and now we're back to blue. So that is the brush picker. Up next is the teleport tool, which gives you this tool right here, and when you click the trigger, you can teleport around the scene. Now, the spectator camera is following me around, but you can see that our drawing is all the way back there. So if we want to get back to our home position, hit the grip buttons and then hit the trackpad, and it snaps us back to our home position. All right, so up next is camera. When you click that, it converts your brush controller into a camera, and right now it's on video mode. So you just hold it up and hit the trigger, and you could record your drawing in different angles and such, just like a video camera would. Up next, you would hit the trigger to save your video, and you could also do a 5-second GIF, which is just like a video, but it converts it into a GIF. You can do an auto GIF, and I don't know if you could tell what's happening there. It's basically rotating the camera side to side. And last is snapshot. You could take a picture of your wonderful drawing. Also in TiltBrush, you could paint in different environments. So for example, we could paint in pure black. We could paint in pure white. Well, it's not really pure white. It's more like a gray, but a very light gray. You could also paint in blue, which is, neutral. It's actually very soothing to paint in blue. And there's also some fun ones, like, for example, the snowman, which gives you a snowman you can decorate. You can also create a pedestal, and you could draw a bust or create something like that. Let me just delete that. You could also design a dress. So you could do, and it's all in 3D, of course. And I don't know if this is a nice dress or not. Put some straps. Well, anyway, you get the idea. Next would be space, which is amazing. People love being in this mode when I demo this to people. And of course, you have a moon here, which is an object. It's a 3D object. And then finally, you have night sky, which is just like the default space we're in, but it's nothing but stars above you. And then, of course, back to our standard environment. All right, so continuing along, alternatively, you have this thing called Sketchbook. Now, this is where you can save and load your previous drawings, but there's also a part called Showcase, and you could browse other people's work. So, for example, this is my favorite. I can't pronounce it. It's Yukio, and I'm not even going to try and pronounce the artist's name, but when you click it, you can see the progress or the flow of how the artist created it. Now, if you want to skip this in your brush hand, you just, in your tool palette hand, you just hold down the brush trigger and, you hold down the trigger and it automatically loads the scene. And as you can see here, it's a 3D picture. And if I go to my camera mode, my video mode, you can see how it works. He created sort of like a wall, and when you come into the painting, there's this whole other world into the painting, and that is amazing. All right, so beside the sketchbook, there's a little trash can, and if you draw something, you could just click the trash can and say clear sketch. Now that will clear your entire scene. So don't get confused with undo and clear. Also, there's these really useful tools here called More, and what you get here is a little tips and tricks which you could go over. A media library. This is where you can load in like reference images. Let me go back here, and it gives you these panels, and you could, for example, the Android little guy model here. So you could bring in actual 3D models like clicking them, and you could bring them in like that. So let me just get rid of this panel. And the way you get rid of panels in TiltBrush is by just simply throwing them. Boom. Isn't that cool? So anyway, here's an object. Now the way I'm grabbing the object is I'm placing my brush, it could be either hand, it doesn't really matter, and then squeezing the grip buttons to move it around. To scale it, you can, with one hand, grip the grip buttons, and on the other controller, squeeze your grip buttons, and then just extend your hands to enlarge or bring them together to shrink. So you could also scale your drawings, but you have to keep in mind that when you scale your drawings, you can't select them individually. It's going to do your entire scene. So for example, with the 3D object, once again, if I squeeze the triggers on both, I could independently scale the 3D object like this Android here. But if I try to scale this, it scales the entire scene. So for example, let me just snap it back to where it was. If I draw something here, here, and here, I can't just select this piece, this piece, this piece, or that piece. TiltBrush does not have layers yet. I'm pretty sure that might be added in the future. So when I scale the environment, it will scale the entire thing. So all the objects will either become extremely large, or if I bring them down to their very small position, there's the stage we were standing in, and there's all those objects that I drew. For example, if I draw a border now, right in front of me on our work area, if I squeeze the triggers and press the trackpad, it will snap us back to our home position. So now you can see that border that I drew along our work area is now, we're standing in it now. So just keep that in mind. When it comes to individual little 3D objects that you create, import, or use, you can scale those independently. But when it comes to your actual drawing, it will scale everything until TiltBrush comes up with a way to individually select these strokes, and you can scale them on your own, which would be extremely useful, by the way. Okay, so continuing with the media library, you can see here that you could also, that's where we were. If you click on images, you could bring in reference images, and that's what we're going to be doing in the next video, is building this TIE fighter. And I could use this, and again, you could scale, shrink, or whatever. You could use this as references when you want to create a drawing. Now, this is really, really helpful. They're guides. And the way it works is you have this panel here, and you got a sphere guide, a cube guide, and a capsule guide. And the way it works is when you create one, let me just get rid of this. When you create one, you can, when you bring your brush close to this object and you hit the trigger, it will paint directly on that object, either be it a capsule, a cube, or in this case, a sphere. All right, so continuing with this one here, there's labs. And what labs can do, for example, you could do a spectator camera, is basically how you're watching this. I could make the camera either stationary, or I can make it do a figure 8, the way it's working now, or I can make it circular, where it will just move along the scene. And let me just get rid of that. And as I'm drawing, you get a little bit more of a dynamic movement. Because you are drawing in 3D, this actually comes in pretty handy. So there you go. So continuing with the more and going to labs, the other thing you have, which is really interesting, is if you're doing a live stream, there's a YouTube chat button where you can, while you're in your VR environment, let me just try and show you this. You could chat with people who are watching your stream. So this way you don't have to take the visor on and off. Let me just get rid of that. And here's a cute little thing. Now I can't really show you this, but there's this little Tiltosaurus, and what that is a game. So people who are in the room watching, they get to see, I don't know if you can see this, I'm not sure how it works. But it says, Tiltosaurus says, draw Johnny Depp, the person. So people who are in the room, you know, you're going ahead and drawing, and it gives them a clue. It'll say an actor, and they have to guess which actor. So it's basically charades. I thought that was pretty interesting. And then finally, under more, you have your settings. So continuing along now, this is pretty basic. This is your color swatch. It comes in two forms. You can either have this circle here, where it allows you to select your color, and then you hit the slider to select the hue of that color, or alternatively, you hit this little square icon here, this little cube, and you can pick your color on this side and select your hue on this side. Okay, so finally, the brushes. This is the last thing to go over. So basically, on the first page of the brushes, there are 3 pages of brushes. It starts you off on this one. There is one that you can go back here, and then there's one at the end. Now, the first one are your standard brushes. This is stuff like oil paint, like that. There's ink, thick paint, and what you can see here, the main difference here is the texture and basically the shape of the brush. And also, by the way, one thing I forgot to mention when going over the controller portion was you could increase the size of your brush by using the trackpad. So you can make really small strokes like that, or big strokes like that. And on the next page, it's more special effect type of brushes. So for example, this is the one we've been using, which is the light. It's called the light brush. There's also fire, and I'll just make this one bigger, and there you go. You have things like embers, right? So the embers that come out of the fire, and of course smoke. You know, you need some smoke if you have fire. So anyway, these are more special effect brushes, and on the last page, it just continues into the special effect type of brushes. Now, I'm not going to go through all of them, but this one is really neat. If I clear this sketch, now I don't have a piece of music here, but this one, if you draw this form, when you play a piece of music on your computer, that will react to the music. It's pretty cool. So that is pretty much it for TiltBrush. So in the next video, let's create that TIE fighter we were talking about, all right? And don't remember to like and subscribe if you want to see more TiltBrush content from me. So I'll see you in the next video.